And we're live. What's up, fantasy football fans? Matthew Bellman and Ryan Kostrowski here. This is the DFS 5-pack. We are here today to talk about the running back situation for your Cleveland Browns, young man. Before we get into the do's and the don'ts of that, I encourage everybody to go check out Overlay Fantasy Sports. They just had a golf contest go live. It'll just be a matter of weeks, and we should get some baseball and some basketball up there as well. Looking forward to the football season.
Can't wait, man. Making these videos is getting me hyped on it even more. So praying that sports are back sooner rather than later. Hearing all these positive COVID tests is not a good sign, but we'll wait and see what happens.
No, young man, it is not. You are 1,000,000% correct on that one, but we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best on this one. Like y'all, we're kind of just stuck in this holding period on a lot of things in life. But we will proceed as though the season is here for us. We're going to talk about your boys, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt right here. Got to be, if not the top, one of the top two one of the top running back combinations in the entire NFL. So we thought we'd address them as kind of a whole today moving forward. If you're new to the station, hit the red button that says subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. And for all of y'all that are nice enough to give the thumbs up, it is greatly appreciated from both of us.
Sure is.
All right, so we're done with last year's experiment. We bring in Kevin Stefanski this year. We've talked through a couple of Browns players already, and the one thing that we agree wholeheartedly on is Stefanski is a run-first type of coach, so you should expect a pretty solid workload for both of these running backs. However, that's at least what I expect.
I expect both of these guys to touch the ball a lot. Not only the system, but also the fact that they're both good. They're both very good.
Exactly. I'm with you 100%. No real injury concerns with either one of these dudes. We've mentioned Alex Van Pelt. We're not going to sit here and pretend that we know a lot about him as a first-year offensive coordinator. When he was in Green Bay, I know Aaron Rodgers spoke very highly of him. But how does that help you for fantasy this season? It doesn't.
No, it really doesn't. Listen, I hope that he works out, and I hope that all these Browns coaches become, Browns coaches for the next 10 years. But for fantasy this year, not sure how much it really affects us.
No, I'm with you on that one. So one of the things I want to touch on, and you mentioned it briefly, is both of these dudes can just flat out tote the rock. They're both young men. Nick Chubb has averaged 5 and 5.2 yards per carry in his first two seasons, both of them coming with quite a few rushing attempts. Kareem Hunt was only at 4.2 last year, but that was in a very small sample size. In his two seasons in Kansas City, 4.6 and 4.9 yards per carry. That is well above the NFL average. These guys can run the football. And if everything is set up the way that they wanted to in Cleveland, they're going to run the football a lot. We spoke highly of Baker Mayfield as far as where we think he can go from a fantasy perspective. But if things go how they want them in Cleveland, Baker may not have a great fantasy season because they just may not need him to.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, the Browns ideally will live and die by the run here. I mean, they really, not only do they have a dynamic duo in Hunt and Chubb, but they, went out of their way to really turn two spots that were weak spots in their offensive tackles and turn them into two really plus positions. Signing Jack Conklin and drafting Wills, in the first round. So those, that free agent move and the draft move, I think, really helped the running game as well.
I could not picture a situation where it doesn't help, right? Again, injuries can happen, but that goes for everybody that we're going to talk about. They definitely set themselves up in a better spot. Often tackles may not come in and be as great as they're going to be first year, but that goes for most positions. But you would expect him to at least be a solid starter. Conklin's clearly a guy that they targeted, paid good money to right in the prime of his career. It seems like good, solid moves to me. I think the hardest part about these guys and wanting to plant your flag on them is this could be like a 50-50 split. I could definitely see a spot where Chubb gets 60% of the carries, 20-30% of the workload in the passing game, and Hunt gets the inverse. Hunt vultured a lot of the goal line touches away from Chubb later down the stretch. Does that mean it's going to be the way that works out this year? No, not necessarily. That's the one conundrum with these guys, that they're both so good.
So if you're asking me, or asking anyone who you want, just in general, not considering where they're getting drafted, etc., it's obviously Chubb. But I'm with you, man. I like both these guys a lot more in real life than I do in fantasy. We talk about that a lot. They're going to eat at each other's value. It's just what it is. Both of these guys are supremely talented, and because they're both so good, it's hard for them both to be fantasy studs. They could both end up being very good, but it's hard to see either of them, really eclipsing value where they're getting drafted as is.
Yeah, the one thing we could say about Hunt is he had 44 targets and 37 catches on those in 8 games last year, really just starting to get and go with the team. So it looked like they wanted to heavily utilize him in the passing game. The one thing I would caution people that on, though, is there is only so many targets to go around. This is a team already loaded in skill position players. You got, he's fallen a little bit, but OBJ is a number one type of talent. Jarvis Landry is a hell of a slot receiver. You bring in Austin Hooper. There's only so many targets that can go around. So, if you had to bet on a guy to be active in the passing game, it's Hunt, but it's difficult for me to see a situation where he's getting, the 5 targets per game that he got last season, or 5.5 even.
I agree, man. Like, I think that, Chubb is the best piece of this offense. So he's the one guy that, I like above the others, but not where he's getting drafted. So as much as I would like guys from Cleveland, I'm not sure that there's that much value here because there's so many good pieces, which is great for us, but not so good for their fantasy prospects.
I'm with you on that one. You already touched on the tackles. I briefly brought up Austin Hooper. They made some additions along the front line. Hooper's another guy, good tight end, should definitely take some targets away from Kareem Hunt. Potentially even some red zone looks like that. There's an embarrassment of riches as far as the Cleveland Browns offense goes, is when it comes to just overall talent, which, again, from a real-life football perspective, you got to be happy as hell.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone through a bunch of these teams, like key additions or losses, and a lot of them are like very meh. They don't really move the needle too much at all. And not saying this one is like spectacular, but it's rare you see a team like grab 2 like starting tackles in the same offseason, and both of them are expected to be like very good. So I'm pumped about that. And then Hooper, yeah, he just adds another element to that offense. We've already talked about all the weapons they have. So I'm excited about the Browns, man. It's scary, but I am.
We were excited last year, but I don't think either one of us was surprised when they weren't good. It seemed like they got a little big for their britches early on. Year 2 with the quarterback, there's a lot more reasons to be encouraged this year, and I am a Stefanski believer. We'll call it that.
For sure. I'm hoping you're right. I like that. It seems like they finally now at least have a direction. Andrew Berry as their GM. We've said this before, though, so that's why I'm so hesitant. I mean, I remember saying this last year, how hesitant I was, and how I know that they had the pieces on paper, but they hadn't done anything yet. I'm more excited for them this year, a year under their belt. They have the talent. There's no excuses, like if they don't put up this year, then, I mean, this team just probably isn't as good as they want it to be.
Well, then you're really looking at Baker Mayfield, right?
Yes.
Because again, I'm harder on OBJ than you are. You're a bigger fan of his than I am, but he can play. I know Jarvis Landry can play. Hooper can play. The running backs can play. If they're not getting it done this season, then I think you have to look for a switch at quarterback because they might just need a new leader.
I'm with you, man. And listen, I'm with you on Odell, too. Like, he's certainly not like an elite number 1 right now, but, I mean, he can play. He can make plays. Like, get him the ball,
Yeah, he's a little polarizing at this point, but we know he's no scrub or anything like that. So you briefly touched on, Nick Chubb's at the end of the year. I would bet good money. It sounds like you would as well. His overall numbers, assuming that everybody's healthy, are going to be better than Kareem Hunt's. I think we both agree on that. Nick Chubb can flat out tote the rock. He's a good runner of the football. But as far as ADP is concerned, this guy's going anywhere from 9th to 20th, it looks like. I struggle. I can't imagine me having Nick Chubb on any teams. I just can't see it. I think he's really, really good. But if you're not going to be – I play in all PPR leagues. I don't think he's going to be too heavily involved in the passing game. Sure, there's going to be some 1st and 10s where they run a pass play to kind of throw some misdirection at the team. He'll get, 2 dozen, 3 dozen catches throughout the season, but not huge utilization. And that's just too high for me to go on a guy. And I think it sounds like you're kind of in the same boat on that one.
Yeah, the best way like for Chubb to produce value where he's getting drafted now is like a high-end RB1. Like the Browns offense is going to have to be like really good, and he's going to have to score a ton of touchdowns, which isn't like inconceivable, but not where I'm going to like put my money.
And the defense has to play well where they're up and just toting the rock with them.
For sure. And I will say, like, to the last point, with the last 2 points, like, yeah, it's a definite must. Like, you have to own the other one if you own one of them. If you draft Chubb, I think you have to draft Hunt. And that's another reason why like I don't love drafting Chubb, because it already takes another draft pick away from me, and not like a late one. Like a decent draft pick, and you, in my opinion, you have to have Hunt if you draft Chubb.
Half is a strong word, but I don't argue with you at all on that one. I would absolutely target Kareem Hunt as an essential backup handcuff if I were to get Nick Chubb, because the thoughts on this one, and again, we are just making educated guesses right here. We talked about this briefly on a different video. What you have if you're the Cleveland Browns this year is if one of these guys gets a little injured, it's really easy to sit them for the week, and we'll go with a kind of a one-man, one-week situation. For a full season, that wouldn't be ideal, but for 1 week, if Nick Chubb's hammy is just a little banged up and you want to make sure he's healthy, let Kareem Hunt take 25 touches that week. He can surely handle it, and he turns into an instant RB1 in that situation. The same goes if Hunt all of a sudden hurts his ankle and he's out for 2 to 4 weeks, Nick Chubb's a top 5 back now.
Yeah, like both of them become potentially like elite RB1s if either the other one is out or is hurt or whatever. So I think you got to own both of them. Like, have is a strong word. And you can still win without having both of them, sure. But I just think it makes, it makes you sleep easier at night knowing you have both. I'll say that.
Right. I mean, there are situations, you constantly use the phrase, let the draft fall to you.
For sure.
If all of a sudden you're sitting there with pick 24 and Chubb is still on the board, which is highly unlikely, I got it, man. Go ahead and get him. He is, with the exceptions of maybe Saquon, the best pure runner of the football in the game. I mean, you can make that argument, right?
He's right up there.
Right. I mean, he's not as overall as good as McCaffrey because of his ability to receive, but just pure runner of the football. I mean, Nick Chubb is really as good as they come. So I get that. And the same thing goes for Kareem Hunt. I'm okay taking just Hunt because if you get him in round 7 or 8 and Nick Chubb gets hurt, man, that is league-winning type of stuff right there.
That's why I kind of phrased it, and I'm glad you said that. If you draft Chubb, I think you need a Hunt. I'm more than fine drafting Hunt later because it's a later pick. There's less at risk. Like, let's put it this way. If you are the guy, it's going to be hard for me to explain. Like, if you if you draft Chubb in the second round and you don't draft Hunt and Chubb gets hurt, like, your season might be fucked, for lack of a better word. If you draft Hunt in late, but you don't have Chubb and Hunt gets hurt, like, you can move on from that. Do you know what I mean?
For sure, 100%. I mean, I knew we were going. It's kind of like you said, I'm glad you touched on that again, but because we've taught these guys over, I kind of felt like you had addressed it as well because I know how you feel about this because we feel very similar in what we can do with these guys. And again, I'm not reaching for Kareem Hunt in round 5 or 6 if I don't have Nick Chubb. But if he slips to me in 7 or 8, I think that's tremendous value right there. The potential upside of that. He's not going to be a guy you're going to start on a weekly basis. But maybe I'm wrong, too. Like, maybe he does get 5, 6 catches per game, and they utilize him very heavy in that situation, at which point that's like a guaranteed 10 points in the PPR league.
I don't, expect it, but I don't, not expect it either just because, we talked about, he's really good. He's good in the passing game. I think he's a really good security blanket check-down option for Baker. I'm not sure how this offseason has affected them, but gotta believe another year is only helping them, right?
Right. The other thing here is we just don't know who's getting the goal line work. Is it split evenly? Because they gave Hunt a bunch of carries within the 5 last year and pulled Chubb a couple of times. That might have just been to check it out, right? They just might have wanted to know how effective he was right there. Clearly, the Browns season was over the last few weeks of the year. They didn't have anything significant to play for. Maybe Chubb gets all the goal line work. Maybe Hunt gets all of it. Maybe they split it 50-50. It's an interesting one to theorize about, and we really just don't know the answer.
Agreed, wholeheartedly. I mean, we just don't.
They're both very capable of doing it. This is not man. Who was the fast guy compliment to Brandon Jacobs on the New York Giants 10 years back? Do you remember who I'm talking about? They had thunder and lightning.
It wasn't Bradshaw, was it?
Ahmad Bradshaw, yeah, it might have been. Yeah, you might have gotten that one right. Where it was clear who the goal line guy was. Brandon Jacobs was 6'4", 280 pounds. You knew he was getting the goal line work, right? This is not that type of situation. Both of these cats are very capable of handling that job. It's just going to be more of a coach's preference.
Yeah, literally the only reason that I don't like either of them more is because they're both so good. That's rare, I feel like.
Yeah, you don't get a lot of that. These guys are both very – put it this way. If Kareem Hunt was on your team, he's the starting running back for 20, 22 teams in football, I would have to guess.
Yeah, same.
He's not going to start ahead of Derrick Henry because he's too good. Saquon, Christian McCaffrey, I guess even Nick Chubb in this situation. But the list gets really short after that.
It really does. Man, I'm really excited about him in our offense too. Like, if we played up to our capabilities, I think we could have one of the better offenses in the AFC, in a questionable AFC.
Man, I'm just trying to think. The more I talk about it, or the more we talk about it, this is a big season for Baker Mayfield because if the Browns' offense isn't playing well, I got to put the onus all on him. I can't see a situation where this receiving core, if you include Austin Hooper, these new tackles who should both be good, this set of running backs, that if the offense isn't putting points on the board, and I'm a believer in Stefanski, I'm looking squarely in the face of Baker Mayfield.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, obviously we have to see it play out because we don't know how it would play out if that happens. But
sure.
I mean, I could not agree more.
So that'll be an interesting one because you tell me, people can say Aaron Rodgers has slipped a little bit. Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you. But you put Aaron Rodgers in this offense, they're putting up points, man. Tom Brady, even at 100 years old, they're putting up points in this offense.
Can you imagine one of those QBs on this team? So, yeah, it's a big season for Baker Mayfield. One of the biggest in the NFL.
Right. Again, I'm harder on Tom Brady than most. But if he had these running backs, imagine what Brady could do with Kareem Hunt, Jarvis Landry, and Austin Hooper. His ability to utilize the short checkdowns in the middle of the field. I mean, they would just – and they even have OBJ. And maybe Brady doesn't throw the ball down the field as well as some other quarterbacks. But the threat of that, I mean, it would just be surgical. 5 yards, 7 yards, 8 yards, 9 yards, just over and over and over again.
It really would. So hopefully Baker can turn into at least a something of that. Not the whole thing, but at least show us signs of that.
Absolutely, guys. That makes me more excited for the football season. Anyways, guys, we appreciate y'all watching. Check out Overlay Fantasy Sports. Click on the thumbs up button if you don't mind, and we will get DFS out in a couple of weeks, hopefully.
Yep, we are praying over here, guys, so thank you.